My children are well-behaved, human. I can warm your bed. The plea of an alien widow mother. The universe rarely screamed when it died. It whispered, softly, like breath caught in the throat of a star. Dr. Ronald Rhee stood in the quiet cradle of the Solum, watching light unravel. Beyond the observatory's dome, Aurelius Theta's last sun surrendered to collapse, its surface folding inward like silk sucked through a pinhole, plasma wrinkled along the star's edge, drawn into its own growing gravity well. No sound, no shockwave, just that slow, incandescent implosion. Ronald breathed in, slow and still. He logged the phase into the ritual record. Phase 4, terminal gravitational distortion achieved. Photonic shell decay at 94%. Surrounding planetary remnants unviable. He paused before committing the entry, his fingers resting on the console's sensor plate. The station's archive chimed once, soft as breath, registering the final ceremony. A digital eulogy etched into the void. The Solum had no crew, no visitors, just him and the dead. Behind him, screens flickered with decayed orbits and starburst trajectories, dust maps, ghosted pulses, history being buried in real time. He turned to leave, then froze. A signal, weak, analog, not one of the standardized distress bursts, more like a memory trying to speak. He redirected it to the audio grid, the frequency warped, scratchy, layered over faint static, not a language he immediately recognized. But there were fragments, echoes wrapped inside the carrier wave. They don't cry, please. I keep quiet. Another pause. Then clear as glass breaking in still air. My children are well-behaved, human. I can warm your bed. The words dropped into his gut like ice. He didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Didn't blink. Then he began scanning the outer rim. The signal came from within the asteroid ring, trailing the collapsed gas giant. A pod, small, drifting without heat signature. The AI retrieval sweep had dismissed it as debris, but it wasn't. He launched a probe toward its position, eyes darting across diagnostic overlays. The pod was in decaying drift, falling out of the orbital eddy. If he didn't act soon, it would cross into the radiation band and disintegrate before the hour ended. He didn't think. He moved. The docking bay shuddered open as Ronald stepped into his suit. Magnetic boots, heated gloves, helmet seal checked twice. His breath fogged the visor momentarily before equalization kicked in. He maneuvered the Solum's armature drone close enough to stabilize the pod's spin, then crossed the short tether bridge manually. The emergency hatch was fused shut from age and exposure. He activated a low-heat torch, slicing along the pod's frame, hands steady despite the rising pressure in his throat. The seal broke with a hiss. Internal pressure held, barely. Inside, the world smelled of dry metal, stale sweat, and old blood. There were 3 figures. The woman, slender, skin a soft violet gray marred by old abrasions, lay curled around 2 children. Her wrap, more ceremonial than practical, hung loose from one shoulder. She was conscious, but barely. Her long black hair clung to her face in damp strands. Her breathing came shallow, mechanical, as if rehearsed. She didn't look at him, only spoke. They are not loud. I made them quiet. I cleaned myself. I can keep you warm. Ronald stood frozen, watching her lips shape each word like a broken prayer. He saw then what the sensors had missed, the faint pulse in the children's necks. The boy, maybe 5, pressed tightly against her side, staring up through the dark with wide, ancient eyes. The girl, smaller, no older than 3, was humming, a soft, rhythmic tone, low and tuneless, as if mimicking the hum of a power core. Ronald reached for his scanner. The woman flinched at the motion, shoulders tensing, eyes darting toward the children. He slowed his hand. I'm not going to hurt you, he said quietly. No response. Just that reflexive stillness. Trauma, he thought, but too controlled, too automatic, like she'd been trained for this. He shifted tone, gentler. You're safe now. I'm going to bring you in. Please, don't move. She didn't, not even to nod. The pod was colder than regulation should have allowed. Internal heating was long gone. The boy's lips had a faint blue tint. The girl's small hands trembled in the stillness. Ronald activated the tether and engaged the manual return clamp. As the pod locked into the Solum's hull, he glanced back at the woman once more. Her eyes were open, watching him, not with hope, with calculation. What will this man demand? He knew that look. He'd seen it once on Earth years ago, when a survivor had crawled out from a collapsed refugee dome after the Bloom storm. that same readiness to trade dignity for safety. Back inside, he moved quickly. He set up an isolation field in the infirmary. Heat, hydration, oxygen calibration, clean sheets, no restraints. He didn't touch her. Instead, he addressed the boy first, offered him a thermal blanket. The child hesitated, then took it. Ronald crouched low to meet his gaze. "You're safe here. No one's going to make you do anything." The boy said nothing, just watched. The woman had not moved from the entrance. "Come in," Ronald said gently. "It's warm." She stepped forward. Her bare feet made no sound on the polished floor. Her arms tightened instinctively around her daughter. He noticed faint scars along her wrists, horizontal, healed, but deliberate. As she sat on the edge of the bed, Ronald offered her a hydration vial. She took it with both hands, but didn't drink. Instead, she held it like a ceremonial object, offering it first to her children. They sipped without speaking. Only then did she lift it to her lips. The first drop made her cough, a sharp, unintentional gasp that startled even her. Ronald stepped forward reflexively. She pulled back, shoulder curling in, eyes shut. "I'm not here to take anything," he said. No reply. The girl curled into her side and resumed humming. The sound made Ronald's spine tighten, not because it was eerie, but because it was practiced, repetitive, like a comfort drilled into habit. "Do you have a name?" he asked gently. Silence, then softly. "Tanya." The name tasted alien and old. He nodded. "Tanya, I'm Ronald. You're safe now." She blinked as if trying to register the word, safe. He moved to leave, giving her space. But before the door hissed shut, her voice reached him, quieter this time, shaky. "If we are too many, I can go. Just keep them. They're good. They don't cry." He didn't answer. Couldn't. Not with words. He stood outside the infirmary a long while, watching the thermal vitals adjust to life again. Later, in his private quarters, he sat beside an old frame. The photo inside was cracked, frosted over from years of neglect, but the image remained. A woman, human, laughing beside a younger version of himself. Between them, a small girl with thick black curls. He turned the frame down, opened a new log. Emergency retrieval, 1 adult female, unknown species, 2 children. Language, partial match to pre-extinction dialects. Names, pending, vital signs, fragile but stable. A pause. Then, female identified herself as Tanya. Voluntarily offered herself for reproductive or domestic trade in exchange for sanctuary. Denied. Children. Responsive. Nonverbal. Behavioral anomalies suggest long-term trauma or cultural conditioning. He leaned back, staring into the dark ceiling of the station. 3 survivors, drifting in from nowhere. No ID, no flag, no origin traceable on any known colony registry. But they were alive, and that meant something, even out here, where stars died with grace and silence. Even after everything he'd lost, something might still begin. The lights in the corridor buzzed softly, pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeat of the solemn. Ronald moved through them like a ghost, quiet, steady, unsure if the infirmary bed would still be warm when he returned. It wasn't. The thermal field flickered. The sheet was rumpled, the hydration vial empty, and the room too still. His eyes scanned the corners by instinct. No sign of forced movement, no overturned furniture, just absence, a precise absence. He activated a soft range motion scan. A faint signature blinked back. Hydroponics sector, deck 2. He exhaled, tension held and released in a single breath, and made his way there. He found them in the light. Tanya was sitting on the floor, one arm around the smaller child, the other stretched protectively across the older boy's chest. The soft green glow of bioluminescent nutrient tanks washed over them, casting them in rippling waves of light and shadow. Her violet skin looked nearly translucent under the chlorophyll-tinted glow. Her hair, black, long, slightly tangled, fell like a curtain across her face. She didn't look up, not at first. The children were eating, methodically, as if remembering how. Tanya wasn't. Ronald didn't speak. He stepped forward slowly and lowered himself to the floor, careful to keep some distance. The deck was cold through his clothes. "You found the packs," he said, more to acknowledge her action than to question it. "I had to," she replied, voice low. "You left. I thought, perhaps we had done something wrong." "You haven't done anything wrong." Her gaze lifted, the light catching in her irises, silver washed in muted gold. "We were taught, if food does not come, find it. If comfort is not offered, earn it." You don't have to earn anything here. She studied him in silence. The boy beside her mimicked her stillness, watching Ronald with the unblinking calm of something that's seen too much and learned not to ask questions. You're used to consequences, Ronald said. Tanya nodded once. We spoke without permission once, after lights out. My sister lost 2 fingers. I learned not to speak unless spoken to. Ronald's jaw tightened, but he didn't show it. The anger had to stay behind the walls. I'm not going to hurt you, he said. You say that, but that doesn't erase what's been carved into us. Nari, the girl, pressed her face into her mother's neck and began to hum softly. That sound again. Not music, not a tune, just vibration, a self-soothing rhythm. How long were you in the pod? He asked. I don't know. Her voice cracked slightly. Long enough the time stopped. Long enough that the children forgot sunlight. Where did it launch from? No name. It was not a place meant to be remembered. We were told to sleep, told we were lucky, but the heat failed, the air grew stale, and we waited. Waited for what? For the dark to finish us. She paused, but it didn't. She finally looked at him then, not as a potential owner, not as a threat, just a man, a shape in the space between her and the void. Ronald stood slowly and extended a hand. Come back to the living deck. There's warmth, a real bed. You don't need to hide. She hesitated. Her fingers twitched, then closed. She rose, not with confidence, but with the grace of someone accustomed to obeying without question. But she didn't take his hand. Back in the infirmary, he recalibrated the atmosphere settings. The air warmed, carrying a hint of sterilized citrus. The children returned to the cot without resistance. Tanya remained standing. I can work, she said suddenly. You have waste systems to clean, panels to recalibrate. I can earn stay. You don't need to. I can serve. Not just with hands, if you want. No. His voice cut through the room, not sharp, but firm enough that even the hum quieted. He softened. Tanya, number. Her mouth remained open a moment longer before it closed. You said that before, she whispered, but I thought it was just kindness. It's not kindness, it's truth. You're not here as barter. You're not part of some exchange. She looked at the floor, then at her children. They do not understand this kind of safety. They will, in time. Siloon, the boy, had not spoken a word. He lay with eyes half closed, fingers tracing a seam in the blanket. Nari clung to her mother's leg, silent now. Her humming paused, but not forgotten. You gave them a bed, she said. You gave them warmth. You offered food. I offered what they needed, and asked for nothing. Ronald nodded. That's what makes this place feel dangerous. She spoke it like a confession. He understood more than he wished he did. He gestured toward the clean basin. There's warm water, soap. You can wash up while they rest. Tanya moved slowly, like someone waiting for the floor to give way beneath her. She stepped into the cleansing alcove and paused at the sight of the steam rising from the basin. Her hands hovered above it, uncertain. He turned away to give her space. From the reflection in the polished panel, he saw her begin to disrobe, slowly, reverently. Not out of shame, but out of long-trained wariness. Her back was marked, faint lines down her spine, pale against her skin. He turned fully and busied himself with the monitor, offering her the small dignity of not being watched. When she returned, she wore the soft gray robe he had laid out. It hung loosely over her frame. She looked at him with something new, not trust, not yet, but something closer to neutrality, the absence of fear. That, too, was progress. I'll show you the living quarters tomorrow, he said. You'll have your own room. Separate? She asked, startled. Yes. But how will I repay you? You won't. You'll rest. You'll heal. That will be enough. She didn't answer, but when she sat beside her children, she did so with her back straight. He dimmed the lights to rest level and stood at the doorway. They're quiet, she said softly. I taught them to be. They don't have to stay that way. Tanya nodded slowly. Then, teach me how. Outside, the remnants of Aureli's Theta star drifted apart, matter turning to memory, memory dissolving into dust. Inside the solum, the hum of quiet life settled into the walls. And for the first time in years, Ronald did not feel entirely alone. The next morning began in stillness, but not silence. Ronald entered the central observatory to check the telemetry on a collapsed planetoid, designation Theta 6b, when the soft sound of movement behind him caught his attention. Tanya stood in the threshold, her hair damp from washing, wearing the same loose station robe. She held a bowl in her hands. Behind her, the children trailed like twin shadows, small, watchful, quiet. Seelan held Nari's hand, his other arm hugging something tightly to his chest. A faded blanket Ronald didn't remember issuing, probably Tanya's. "I made this," she said. She didn't wait for permission. She crossed the room and gently placed the bowl on the console's flat edge, careful not to touch the instruments. Ronald glanced down. The bowl held something soft and steamed, nutrient mash from the station's rations, rehydrated and folded with hydroponic herbs. Not fancy, but assembled with care. "Thank you," he said. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said quietly. That mattered more than the food. Seelan approached the console and stood beside his mother. He didn't speak. He just studied Ronald's hands, the motion of his fingers across the panel, the glowing star map. Ronald turned the projection slightly, letting the image of Theta 6b hover mid-air, a ghost of a world. Its surface cracked from gravitational rifts, its mass now a slow drift toward the system's event edge. "It was a planet," Seelan said, surprising them both. His voice was faint but clear. Tanya flinched at the sound. Her gaze darted to Ronald like she expected punishment for the boy's interruption. Ronald knelt down, not touching him, just lowering himself to eye level. "Yes, it was. It lived a long time, then it died." "Is it in pain?" That stilled him. "No," Ronald said softly. "Not anymore." Seelan nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something he already suspected. Tanya sat with Nari in her lap, her back straight, eyes following every motion. She didn't speak, but her body remained coiled, always half ready to rise and retreat. Ronald took a bite from the bowl. Warm, savory, comforting in a way most processed foods weren't. "It's good," he said. Tanya looked down, not quite smiling, but no longer stiff. Nari clambered off her lap and wandered to the viewport. The girl pressed her tiny hands against the glass, her breath fogging the pain. "Is the sky broken?" she asked. Ronald joined her. "That's not sky. That's the belt. Pieces of a broken world. But they're still out there, turning." Nari hummed softly, forehead against the cold glass. Tanya rose slowly. "What was this place?" "Before us." "This station?" She nodded. "It was meant to observe end-of-life events, star deaths, planetary collapses, a place for dignified recordings, ceremonies for systems no one would remember otherwise. You mourn. Stars." "Yes." Tanya stood quietly for a moment. Then, "No one mourned my people. Not when the dome burned. Not when the last pod launched." She looked at him. "Only silence. That was our burial." "I can record them," Ronald said. Her eyes narrowed faintly, not in suspicion, but in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I mean they deserve to be remembered, the same way I honor the fallen of this system." "You didn't even know them. That doesn't mean they didn't matter." Tanya sat again, her hands folding in her lap. Her breath caught on something, grief or maybe disbelief. "I don't remember their names anymore," she said. "Just the colors of their wraps, the smells, the sound of one of them laughing in the dark. She had a gap in her front teeth. She used to sing when we were too afraid to sleep." Ronald opened a new log. "Tell me what you do remember, anything. It doesn't have to be perfect." Tanya hesitated. Then slowly she began to speak. She described a violet dome with painted ceilings and firelit paths, the way water from the collector pool would trickle down in a melody only the children could hear. She described wraps with beads stitched by hand, the scent of ashroot tea, the quiet thrum of generators built centuries before she was born, and the silence after the purge began, how the dome filled with smoke and the singing stopped. Ronald said nothing. He just typed, word by word, as she dictated memory into permanence. When she paused, Seelan picked up the thread. "There was a man with long arms who lifted me up when the lights failed. He called me Second Star. I don't know why." Tanya closed her eyes. "He was your uncle. He braided your hair with riverstone beads." Ronald kept typing. He didn't ask what happened to the uncle. He already knew. The room fell quiet again, the kind of quiet that felt earned, not imposed. Ronald closed the log and locked it into the archive. "Now they're remembered," he said. Tanya didn't cry, but her fingers shook slightly as she reached for her daughter. Seelan stepped forward. Without a word, he broke off a piece of the rehydrated flatbread from the plate on the console and held it out. Ronald looked at it, then knelt again, this time to meet the boy not as a superior, not as an observer, but as someone willing to receive. He took the offering with both hands. "Thank you," he said. Saloon blinked once. Tanya's face didn't change, but her body stopped bracing. Just for a moment. She didn't flinch. And that, Ronald thought, might be the first true shift in gravity. Inside the Solum, the air was still, the walls unchanged, but something unseen had begun to move. Ronald had been working in silence when he noticed the sound. Small, quick footsteps moving down the auxiliary ramp. Not rushed, not hesitant, just precise, curious. Saloon appeared in the doorway of the calibration bay, hands behind his back, shoulders square like someone mimicking confidence. The boy scanned the room, his gaze landing on the central console where a photonic lens was mounted. "What does that do?" he asked. Ronald didn't turn away from the panel. He just reached down and tapped a sequence that activated the live readout. Pale blue symbols began pulsing across the screen. "It listens to dust," he said. Saloon frowned. "Dust?" "Stardust, leftovers from planets and moons long gone. The lens catches the way they scatter light and vibration. It tells me how they lived, how they died." Saloon stepped closer. "Can it see us?" "Number, not the way you mean. But if you stood in front of it, you'd interrupt the reading. It would record your shadow as noise. Then we would become part of the memory." Ronald looked at him. "Yes, you would." Saloon nodded, then carefully pulled something from behind his back, a flatbread wrap folded with practiced hands. "Mom said I should bring this, because you don't stop to eat." Ronald took it with both hands. "Thank you." Saloon didn't smile, but his posture relaxed. He walked around the edge of the console and watched the lens adjust its arc. "Can I help?" Ronald paused, then reached for a secondary interface node and dimmed the display slightly. "Here." He guided the boy's hand to a small dial. "When the light turns amber, adjust the angle by 1/2 degree. That keeps the sensor from burning out." Saloon didn't hesitate. He watched the readings, fingers resting lightly on the dial. Tanya arrived a few minutes later. She stood in the corridor, arms crossed over her chest, watching her son without interrupting. When Ronald looked up, she didn't speak, just gave the faintest nod. Later, in the stillness of the observatory dome, she came to him again. No announcement, no pretext. He was seated alone on the floor, legs stretched out, drinking from a ceramic cup. The stars beyond the glass burned soft and strange, one of the minor dwarf remnants pulsing in uneven intervals. She sat beside him. "You treat them like they matter," she said. He didn't look at her. "They do." Tanya exhaled. "I know they do. But I wasn't taught that I mattered. Not unless I was useful." Ronald turned to her then. "You're not useful to me," he said. She blinked. "That sounds harsh. It's not meant to be. You're not here for what you offer. You're here because you're you." Tanya looked away. "I don't know what that means. Not yet." He didn't push. After a long pause, she spoke again. "There were moments, back in the dome, when I used to wonder if it would be better to not feel, to just be what they wanted. But then I'd hear Nari hum, or Saloon whisper stories in the dark, and I'd feel everything at once, all the pain, all the fear, all the love I wasn't allowed to show." Her voice didn't waver, but her hands did, tucked into her lap, fingers curling over her wrist where the faint scars still lingered like forgotten signatures. Ronald reached out, not suddenly, not insistently, just a quiet offering. He placed his hand gently over hers. She tensed, a breath caught, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her palm upward and closed her fingers around his. It was not a romantic touch. It was not a gesture meant to promise anything. It was acknowledgement. She was here. He saw her. "I remember things now that I didn't let myself remember before," she said. "The way the air used to smell when rain hit the dome's edge. The sound my sister made when she laughed with her mouth full. The way my son's fingers curled into my robes when he was nursing. I thought those memories were gone, but they weren't. They were just waiting for something. Safe." Ronald nodded. "Memory is like gravity. It waits to be pulled back into orbit." Tanya smiled just a little. Saloon entered then, holding a small lens plate. "Can I leave this here?" he asked. Ronald nodded. "You adjusted the readings well." Saloon looked at Tanya. "He taught me." Tanya tilted her head. "I saw." "Can I come back tomorrow?" She looked to Ronald. "It's up to him." Ronald looked between them. Yes, he said, anytime. I held the door. I told myself I was saving others, but she was on the other side of it. Neither spoke for a while. Nari slept against her mother. Seelan rested quietly, blinking toward Ronald as though seeing him for the first time not just as a helper, but as someone with grief of his own. Tanya opened her eyes again. Her voice, when it returned, was low but steady. I didn't know humans buried their dead in space. We record them, their paths, their last orbits. I make sure no one is forgotten. And now? Ronald looked at the children, then at her. I'd rather remember the living. Tanya reached out, not fully, not confidently, but her hand touched the back of Ronald's. A brush, nothing more. But she didn't pull away, and neither did he. Ronald had been working in silence when he noticed the sound. Small, quick footsteps moving down the auxiliary ramp. Not rushed, not hesitant, just precise, curious. Seelan appeared in the doorway of the calibration bay, hands behind his back, shoulders square like someone mimicking confidence. The boy scanned the room, his gaze landing on the central console where a photonic lens was mounted. What does that do? He asked. Ronald didn't turn away from the panel. He just reached down and tapped a sequence that activated the live readout. Pale blue symbols began pulsing across the screen. It listens to dust, he said. Seelan frowned. Dust? Stardust, leftovers from planets and moons long gone. The lens catches the way they scatter light and vibration. It tells me how they lived, how they died. Seelan stepped closer. Can it see us? Number, not the way you mean. But if you stood in front of it, you'd interrupt the reading. It would record your shadow as noise. Then we would become part of the memory. Ronald looked at him. Yes, you would. Seelan nodded, then carefully pulled something from behind his back, a flatbread wrap folded with practiced hands. Mom said I should bring this, because you don't stop to eat. Ronald took it with both hands. Thank you. Seelan didn't smile, but his posture relaxed. He walked around the edge of the console and watched the lens adjust its arc. Can I help? Ronald paused, then reached for a secondary interface node and dimmed the display slightly. Here. He guided the boy's hand to a small dial. When the light turns amber, adjust the angle by 1/2 degree. That keeps the sensor from burning out. Seelan didn't hesitate. He watched the readings, fingers resting lightly on the dial. Tanya arrived a few minutes later. She stood in the corridor, arms crossed over her chest, watching her son without interrupting. When Ronald looked up, she didn't speak, just gave the faintest nod. Later, in the stillness of the observatory dome, she came to him again. No announcement, no pretext. He was seated alone on the floor, legs stretched out, drinking from a ceramic cup. The stars beyond the glass burned soft and strange, one of the minor dwarf remnants pulsing in uneven intervals. She sat beside him. You treat them like they matter, she said. He didn't look at her. They do. Tanya exhaled. I know they do, but I wasn't taught that I mattered. Not unless I was useful. Ronald turned to her then. You're not useful to me, he said. She blinked. That sounds harsh. It's not meant to be. You're not here for what you offer. You're here because you're you. Tanya looked away. I don't know what that means. Not yet. He didn't push. After a long pause, she spoke again. There were moments, back in the dome, when I used to wonder if it would be better to not feel, to just be what they wanted. But then I'd hear Nari hum, or Seelan whisper stories in the dark, and I'd feel everything at once, all the pain, all the fear, all the love I wasn't allowed to show. Her voice didn't waver, but her hands did, tucked into her lap, fingers curling over her wrist where the faint scars still lingered like forgotten signatures. Ronald reached out, not suddenly, not insistently, just a quiet offering. He placed his hand gently over hers. She tensed, a breath caught, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she turned her palm upward and closed her fingers around his. It was not a romantic touch. It was not a gesture meant to promise anything. It was acknowledgement. She was here. He saw her. I remember things now that I didn't let myself remember before, she said. The way the air used to smell when rain hit the dome's edge. The sound my sister made when she laughed with her mouth full. The way my son's fingers curled into my robes when he was nursing. I thought those memories were gone, but they weren't. They were just waiting for something. Safe, Ronald nodded. Memory is like gravity. It waits to be pulled back into orbit. Tanya smiled just a little. Siloon entered then, holding a small lens plate. "Can I leave this here?" he asked. Ronald nodded. "You adjusted the readings well?" Siloon looked at Tanya. "He taught me." Tanya tilted her head. "I saw." "Can I come back tomorrow?" She looked to Ronald. "It's up to him." Ronald looked between them. "Yes," he said, "anytime." Seelan placed the plate gently on the table and left without another word. Ronald and Tanya remained where they were, their hands still joined. The quiet wasn't heavy now. It wasn't loaded with fear or caution. It simply was. Outside, a stardust wave scattered across the belt, triggering a pulse through the photonic lens. The sensors sang in response, soft, slow tones echoing like a cosmic breath. Tanya leaned slightly closer. "I want to warm your bed, Ronald," she said. "But not because I'm afraid. Not because I was taught to offer it. I want to. Because when I'm near you, my body remembers what it means to be mine." Ronald's breath stilled, not because of desire, but because of the truth in her words. He touched her cheek, softly, reverently, not to pull her closer, not to begin anything, just to be there, to let her know she wasn't alone in that moment. Tanya closed her eyes and pressed her face into his palm. When she wept, it was silent, not because she was trying to be quiet, but because it was the first time she had ever felt safe enough to cry without asking permission. The cold came without drama, a quiet drop in pressure here, a subtle flicker in a hallway sensor there, no alarms, no bursts of steam or flashing red lights, just absence, gradual and patient. Ronald noticed it first when his breath misted in the engineering bay. He touched the wall and felt the chill sink into his fingertips. A systems check confirmed it. Secondary thermal distribution was failing. No breach, no critical loss, but a slow collapse of heat through the outer decks. He rerouted power to the core zones, his quarters, the infirmary, the observatory. Everything else went dark. By the time he reached the central corridor, Tanya was already gathering the children. She moved with precision. One arm wrapped around Nari, the other guiding Siloon by the shoulder. Her eyes met Ronald's across the dimming light, and she nodded. No panic, no questions, just awareness. He led them to his quarters, closest to the station's heat core. Inside, the air was warm, stable. Nari clung to her mother's wrap, her lips slightly blue. Siloon sat on the floor without speaking, arms wrapped around his knees, eyes steady and wide. Ronald pulled an insulated blanket from storage and wrapped it around both children, adjusting the thermal regulators to hold steady just above body temperature. "It's safe here," he said. "You'll warm up quickly." Tanya remained by the door, shoulders tense. Her breath was steady, but her hands were shaking. "You can stay here tonight," Ronald said. "It's the warmest place until the systems are recalibrated." She nodded. "Thank you." "I'll stay in the observatory," he added. "Plenty of heat left there." Tanya hesitated. She looked at her children, then back at him. "You don't have to go," she said softly. He paused. "Do you want me to stay? I don't want to be alone." Her voice was clear, honest. He stepped farther into the room and sat near the wall, keeping his distance. The children were already drifting toward sleep. Nari had curled into Siloon's side, and both were quiet, eyes half-lidded, breath slow. Tanya stood at the center of the room, unmoving. "I never slept in someone else's bed without cost," she said. "There's no cost here." She looked down. "Even when there wasn't a price, I paid one anyway, in fear, in silence." Ronald didn't speak. She crossed the room, slowly, deliberately. She didn't lower herself beside him yet. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, eyes on the floor. "I thought offering warmth was the only way I'd be allowed to stay anywhere," she said. "And now," she looked up at him, "now I want to offer it because I choose to." He didn't move, not until she did. When she reached for his hand, he met hers gently. Their fingers closed around each other's like two parts of a lock. She came to sit beside him, their backs against the wall, legs stretched out before them. Her head eventually found its way to his shoulder. She exhaled once, slow and full, as though the weight of months, maybe years, finally left her lungs. He said nothing. Neither of them needed to. After a long moment, she lifted her head and looked at him. "I want to share your bed, Ronald. Not for safety, not for gratitude, for closeness. Because my body still remembers what it means to be mine. And I want to give it, not offer it. That matters." He studied her face, the steady way her eyes met his. The quiet strength that came from choice, not desperation. I want you near, he said. She leaned forward, forehead touching his. No rush, no pressure. Their lips met gently, a breath of warmth traded between them. She kissed him not like someone trying to please, but like someone discovering her own desire. When they pulled apart, she didn't look away. Will it change things? She asked. I hope so, he replied. Things should change when they matter. She smiled, small but real. They stood together and moved to the bed, careful not to disturb the sleeping children. Ronald lay beside her, his arm around her waist, their legs tangled beneath the blanket. The heat between their bodies radiated slow and true, deeper than any thermal system could offer. She didn't tremble. He didn't retreat. They simply rested, their hearts aligned, not by survival, but by choice. In the quiet that followed, Tanya whispered, I didn't know safety could feel like this. Ronald pressed his face gently into her hair. Neither did I. She wept, just a little, not from sorrow, but because she was warm, and no one expected anything from her but to sleep. And this time, she did. Ronald woke before the station's artificial dawn. The quarters were still dim, lit only by the soft glow of the emergency override light that blinked once every 10 seconds in the far corner. He lay on his side, arms curled around a weight he hadn't known he'd missed all his life. Tanya. She was asleep, her breath warm against his collarbone, her leg resting lightly over his. Her hand was pressed between them, fingertips grazing the curve of his ribs, not in defense, not in fear, but in comfort. Claimed, but not owned. Nari slept pressed against her mother's back, one tiny hand clinging to the hem of her tunic. Silun had taken his usual post near the foot of the bed, curled beneath a folded thermal wrap, his head resting on an old maintenance pad he insisted was a command pillow. The silence was whole. Ronald didn't move for a long time. He didn't want to. But the blinking override light reminded him the world outside this moment still existed. He slipped from the bed carefully, covered Tanya's shoulders, and stepped out into the corridor. The Solum hummed around him, steady and low, like an old machine content in its function. The cold from the week before had passed. Thermal stability had been restored. The systems were holding. Still, something pulled at him. Not warning, just instinct. He made his way to the comms terminal. It was flashing. He froze. It wasn't a routine diagnostic pulse, not a sensor echo or environmental ping. This was a transmission. Secure band. Coalition encrypted. He tapped the console. Outer Ring Coalition priority alert subject. Unregistered life forms detected. Confirmation required. Signal source, Orcs 23 Solum. Status. Unauthorized non-human entities. Detected action required. Verification and preparation for collection units en route. Estimated arrival, 36 standard hours. Ronald stared at the screen. Not just a notice, a retrieval order. They were coming. His chest tightened, not in panic but in something colder, sharper, like a blade sliding into a sheath it remembered too well. He disabled the alert and initiated a local lockdown. It wouldn't hold against an official boarding procedure, but it would buy time. Then he ran the override access protocols buried in the Solum's original charter. Ancient, rarely used clauses designed for field commanders on deep space missions. A contingency once meant for diplomatic hostages and refugee settlers. Custodial protective bond. Class 3 emergency proclamation. He entered his name, then Tanya's, then the children's. Ronald Rhee. Status, protector, Tanya. Status, dependent, recognized as sovereign exile. Silun, Nari. Status, minors under guardianship. Claimed family unit, irreversible, locked. The system resisted. It demanded command authentication. He gave it. Not through credentials, but through blood, literally. The biometric scan required a DNA-linked override, a failsafe so old it had to be activated manually. He pricked his finger, let the reader take it. The light blinked once. Confirmed. Custodial unit established. Coalition override denied. It was done. He stood there for a moment longer, chest tight, fists clenched. Then he turned back. Tanya was awake when he returned. She sat on the edge of the bed, pulling her hair back with slow, thoughtful fingers. Her eyes met his as he entered. "You felt it," he said. "I heard something," she answered. The tone of the walls changed. "They're coming." She nodded. "I thought they would. They want to take you, study you, classify the children." She didn't ask what would happen after. He knelt in front of her and took her hands. "I stopped them." "How?" "I invoked an old law. I claimed you." Tanya's eyes searched his. "Claimed?" "As my family." Her breath hitched, just slightly. Is that allowed? Number, not really. She smiled. It wasn't a joyful smile. It was proud, fierce. You'd break laws for us? I didn't break them, he said. I rewrote the ones that forgot people like you existed. She reached up, her palm resting over his heart. And what happens when they arrive anyway? Then they'll have to look me in the eyes when they try to take what's mine. Behind them, Nari stirred. Saloon sat up slowly, blinking. He looked from Ronald to his mother, sensing tension, but not fear. What happened? He asked. We're a unit now, Ronald said, standing. No one can undo that. Tanya stood too. She took Ronald's hand and faced her son. Do you understand what that means? She asked. Seelan nodded. We're not going anywhere. Nari, still half asleep, mumbled. Even if the stars fall? Ronald smiled. Especially then. That night they gathered in the observatory. The children curled together on a padded bench while Tanya and Ronald sat near the viewport, shoulder to shoulder. Outside, the fragments of Aureli's Theta still drifted, remnants of collapse glowing in slow-motion fire. Ronald activated the harmonic lens and the room filled with the low hum of stardust vibration. It wasn't music. It wasn't speech. It was the song of things once thought dead, still echoing in space. Will they come tomorrow? Tanya asked. Probably. Will they understand? Maybe, but I don't need them to. She leaned her head against his. This place used to feel like the end of things, she said. It was. Until you arrived. She looked up at him. You once said I reminded you that life is still breathing. I did. And now? Now you remind me that it wants to grow. She kissed him then, slowly, fully, without hesitation. Not because they might lose each other, but because they'd finally found something worth keeping. Outside the dome, the stars shifted. One new light blinked into existence, a small, brilliant flare just beyond the observation ring. The system hadn't predicted it. No one had. Ronald stared at the console. Unregistered star event, Sector Theta, Ring 6. Classification, Infant Star. Designation, LUMINA. He smiled and logged the event manually. Status, confirmed, alive. Notes, unexpected. Origin unknown. Growth imminent. Tanya rested her head on his shoulder. Lumina, she whispered. A beginning, he replied. And for once, he didn't feel like a man documenting the end of things. He felt like a man who had finally become part of something that was just beginning. The Solum had grown quieter in a different way. Not emptier, not colder, just full. The kind of quiet that came from contentment, not silence. The children no longer flinched at the creaks of pressure valves or the whisper of ventilation fans. Their sleep was deep now, undisturbed. They didn't cry in their dreams anymore. Ronald sat at the edge of the hydroponics bay, watching green take root. Tanya had done most of the work. She'd sectioned off a corner, rerouted moisture from the reclamation tanks, and laid compost made from nutrient paste and broken insulation fiber. It shouldn't have worked, but it had. Shoots pushed through gel trays. Tiny tendrils curled around repurposed cables like vines finding purchase in old ruins. She hadn't asked permission. He hadn't offered it. It was simply something she did. A woman who had spent years inside sealed steel compartments and broken pods, building life in the place designed only for endings. Tanya was kneeling now, bare-kneed on a thermal pad, pressing new seeds into the soil with slow, deliberate hands. Her sleeves were rolled back, forearms dusted in grain and powder. Ronald crouched beside her, silently passing her tools when needed. She didn't have to ask. He knew the rhythm now. They won't all survive, she said. Nothing ever does, he replied. She glanced at him. You still talk like you expect loss. It's not expectation, just readiness. Do you think that makes you stronger? He thought for a moment. Number, but it makes me gentler. That earned a quiet nod from her. From the far wall, Nari giggled as Seelan tried to untangle his fingers from the creeping vine she'd wrapped around his wrist like a bracelet. It thinks I'm a pole, he muttered. You're not a pole, Nari laughed. You're the sun. Ronald smiled. They've started naming things, Tanya said. Each sprout, each root. That's how children build safety. That's how anyone builds safety. She stood and wiped her hands on her tunic. The artificial lights above caught the sheen on her skin. Her posture was different now. Not defensive, not poised for retreat. She moved like someone who belonged. They want to show you the drawing, she said. He followed her through the corridor. Silin and Nari had dragged a long strip of recycled foil across the main bench in the observation dome. Crude pigment from root dyes stained it, smudged stars, a domed roof, and 4 stick figures beneath it. Too large, too small. He leaned down. "This one's me?" he asked. "You have big shoulders," Nari said. "And your ears stick out," Silun added. Tanya watched from a few steps away, arms folded but relaxed. Her eyes were softer now, less guarded, not dulled, just less prepared for pain. "Will we live here forever?" Nari asked. Ronald glanced at Tanya. She answered first. "If you want to," Nari nodded firmly. "I do." Silin looked at Ronald. "Will you stay even when we grow up?" "I'm not going anywhere." That night, Ronald stood outside the sleeping quarters. Inside, the children had already curled into their usual places. Nari in the center, clinging to a worn blanket. Saloon near the foot, his command station made from stacked storage crates and an empty diagnostics tablet. Tanya joined him quietly. "You've changed the gravity of this place," she said. "No," Ronald said. "You did. I just stopped pushing against it." She turned to face him. "I want to ask something." "Go ahead." She hesitated, not from fear. "When I first offered myself to you, I didn't know what it meant to want." He didn't speak, "But now I do. And I still want to be with you. Not out of debt, not for warmth, for us." Ronald stepped closer, placed his hand gently at her waist. "You don't owe me your body. I'm not offering it as a debt." He looked into her eyes, saw the steadiness there. No plea, no doubt, just choice. They kissed again, not tentative this time, familiar, sure. She leaned into his chest as he held her, his hand in her hair, her fingers over his heart. Inside the room, the garden light dimmed for the night cycle. Outside the viewport, the stars shifted. Tanya whispered against his skin, "I thought I was a remnant." "You're not," he said. "You're the seed." She smiled into his shirt. "Then let's grow." They stood like that a long time, together, rooted, alive. "Can I call him Dad?" The question came out of nowhere, but not without weight. Tanya looked at her son. Ronald froze. Nari tilted her head. "I already do." Silin nodded. "Then I want to too." Ronald didn't answer immediately. He looked at them. 2 children who had once been silent, watchful, wary. Now they were choosing, not offering themselves in fear, choosing. "Yes," he said. His voice cracked slightly. "I'd be honored." Later, Tanya and Ronald stood in the dome, arms around each other, watching the system's outer belt rotate. A single light pulsed in the distance, faint, erratic. Ronald tapped the console. New object detected, class, protostar origin, unknown growth, confirmed. He leaned back. "Lumina," he said. "Still holding." Tanya smiled. "She's not just holding, she's burning." And for the first time, Ronald didn't feel like a keeper of the dead. He felt like a father, like a partner, like a man finally rooted in something that would outlast him, not because it needed to, because it chose to.